Well, after the show, I'm going to have to write, "I will not disparage Randy Dobnak" 100 times on a chalkboard. Hello and welcome to the Twinkie Town Tavern, where the beer is always cold and the Twins talk is always hot and the stools are always open. I'm your host, Josh Kolojeski, inviting you to grab a drink, pull up a chair, and let's talk about this Twins 4-0 loss to the Kansas City Royals. Let's get into it. The Minnesota Twins had absolutely no juice on offense against one of the worst starting pitchers in Major League Baseball, while their ace continued to struggle after a 1-2-3 first inning. Ryan runs into trouble then in the second by putting runners on the corners with nobody out, but 3 straight fly balls gets him out of that jam unscathed. It would be the last time he left an inning unscathed in this game. Tyler Tolbert takes him deep to put the Royals up to lead off the top of the third, and then Salvador Perez leads off the fourth with a triple and later comes in to score on Nick Lofton's sacrifice fly. To the fifth we go, and Carter Jensen hits an RBI double off the left field wall, and Jack Caglione is able to bring him in with a single later in the frame. Joe Ryan lasts 6 innings, strikes out 4, and allows 4 runs on 8 hits to get tagged with the 7th loss of the season. Kendry Rojas came out of the bullpen and tossed 3 scoreless innings as the lone bright spot in this one, as the Twins offense was flustered all game by Randy Dobnak, getting runners into scoring position just twice during the entire contest and going 0 for 2 during those 2 at-bats where they had runners in scoring position. The Twins lose 4-0 and fall to 54-55. They were in 3rd place in the AL Central Division, just 3 games behind Chicago, and they're now a game and a half behind Cleveland for the final AL wildcard spot. Let's get into it. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Twinkie Town Tavern as we break down this loss to the Kansas City Royals. We are a part of the Grey Duck Sports Network. Go ahead, give us a follow on Twitter and YouTube. We are at Grey Duck Sports there, and then on TikTok we are at grey.duck.sports. There you'll find not only these shows in their full entirety, but also clips from the shows and stories about Minnesota Twins history and my daily thoughts on the squad en masse. Not a great game. So for this one, definitely a disappointing one that I think we've seen a little bit too often with this Minnesota Twins team this year. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, thinking maybe they had pulled themselves out of this place where every time they're about to get up to 500, they go on a little bit of a losing streak and then fall 4 or 5 games back and then have to make a climb back out of the ditch the next week. Well, that game was only postponed, or that sort of game to start that losing streak, it seems like might have been just postponed by 1 day, because the Minnesota Twins had absolutely nothing against Randy Dobnak, and to make matters worse, Joe Ryan's second half struggles, which have been well documented throughout his Twins tenure, are coming to a head once again. Over his last 6 starts, this was not a good start by him by any means. 33 innings pitched, 24 runs allowed. It would have been 24 earned runs had scorer not ended up giving Royce Lewis an error about a week after a game in Houston, so he gave up 6 unearned runs in that game. In the last 6, though, he has 18 earned runs, 7 walks, 36 strikeouts, 1-4, with a 4.91 ERA. And if we look at his second half career numbers, 17-19, 4.96 ERA. His rate on the strikeouts goes up. His walk rate stays consistent, but his home run rate post All-Star break doubles. He goes from giving up 1 home run per 9 inning, or 1.1 per 9 innings, to 2.1 per 9 innings, giving up an average of 1 more home run per start, and that is not a key to success if you want to be an ace pitcher. He's been an ace in the first half of every season that he's played with the Minnesota Twins, but whether it's fatigue, whether it's now a lack of command, which doesn't always mean a lack of being able to find the zone, but a lack of being able to put the pitch exactly where you want it in the zone, something is wrong with Joe Ryan's game as he gets later and later on into the season. And that's obviously bad news down the home stretch over the next 2 months. And if we get into the postseason, it's going to be tough to have optimism, and you'll probably have to give him a short leash for any postseason start that he makes if this trend continues, and we have no reason to believe that this trend shouldn't continue at this point. The main problem tonight was finding the right place to put his fastball and getting the same sort of life on the fastball that he had in the first half of the season pre-All-Star break. His fastball, which he attacks the top of the zone with and goes above the zone often, he doesn't like to pitch it down and away. He doesn't like to nibble on the bottom part of the zone. He likes to try and get that fastball at the eye level of the hitters so that every breaking pitch that he throws off of that looks a little bit more enticing to swing at. But today, his location of the fastball was not great. He was throwing it for strikes, but it was more middle or middle left, middle right in that middle vertical section of home plate where it goes right into the swing paths of so many of these hitters. His fastball did not have, it had the movement, but what he said after the game was it just didn't have the life, and he's trying to work through things. But now we've seen that. We've heard him trying to work through things in the last 4 or 5 years that he's been with the Twins. 2021, obviously, he hadn't pitched as much in the minor leagues during the first half of the season, so he actually had decent numbers during the second half because that was the only time that he had pitched in the major league level at any point in his career at that point. But 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, and now 2026, it is 5 straight years of seeing this sort of thing happen. And I'm not Pete Mackey. I don't know what they're going to be working on behind the scenes, but it needs to be a good command of that fastball. That fastball cannot go lower than the upper third of the zone, or else it gets right into the wheelhouse of opposing hitters. And another thing from this start was Joe Ryan and his slider just did not do anything in this game. His slider, if you look at the Baseball Savant player breakdown, where you can have a graph of how far a ball breaks out of the release of the pitcher's hand, the slider for Joe Ryan, the sweeper was good, but the slider in particular for Joe Ryan, which I think he threw probably a little bit too often today, had no horizontal movement whatsoever. It was basically just a straight down break, which kind of works for Ryan, who has a fastball that runs so far, so it can still, that slider can still have that same distance away relative, because it's still a good ways down and away from where that fastball ends up. But if you're not getting any movement of the slider, and you're leaving that up in the zone, and you're not able to get it down in the zone, then that's a pitch that you just cannot use. So he didn't have a feel for the fastball, wasn't able to completely command it. Splitter looked good, sweeper looked good, but again, he is a pitcher that goes about 50% fastball in most of his starts, 50% four-seam fastball, and when he is able to attack the top of the zone and go above the zone and get hitters to chase, that is when he is at his best. But now we see him, I don't know if it's fatigue, I don't know what the exact reason is, but he is leaving it middle for a lot of these major league hitters. And when that fastball tops off or averages 93, 94 miles per hour, even with the extension that he has, even with the varied release points, when it has that sort of not velocity, when it just doesn't have the velocity and you put it middle, then major league hitters are going to be able to get hard contact. And that was exactly what happened. Carter Jensen with a double, Salvador Perez with a big double. And then, of course, Tolbert with the home run, and a lot of other balls were hit hard. And he continued to get himself into trouble. Every single inning outside of the first, runners got on base. He was forced to labor a little bit. He was forced to work from the stretch. So that makes matters even worse for a player who already has fatigue in the second half of the season that has affected his play every single year. So needs to get back into the lab, needs to get back with Pete Mackey, needs to have confidence in that fastball again and just a little bit better command. And then I think we're back to the old Joe Ryan, but I don't have much confidence that's going to happen because we have not seen a track record of that happening with real consistency during Joe Ryan's tenure in the second half post All-Star break of this season. That was probably the most disappointing part of this game. The second most disappointing part of this game was the Twins offense not being able to do anything against Randy Dobnak. And I will take the blame for this because in yesterday's podcast, I said, and I joked that I'm not sure Randy Dobnak has won a game. I'm not sure Randy Dobnak has shown any capability of being a major league pitcher since 2021. And I didn't have the stats in front of me, but that was absolutely correct. He had not won a game at the major league level, partially because he spent so much time in AAA after a disastrous 2021 season, but he has not won a game since 2021 until today. 2021, he went 1-7 that year. After a 6-4 2020 campaign, that was probably his best. And he gets his 10th career win in this game and his first win in about 5 years. So that is something crazy to think, and it comes against his former team that has one of the top offenses in the game. And that is something that is super frustrating. It was just a lack of ability to hit his sinker, which, to his credit, does have run, but the rest of his stuff is nothing to write home about. The changeup that we once thought would be a third good pitch for him after the 2020 season, and that's why we gave him a 5-year contract extension, because we thought we could lock down some of those arbitration years, and that would get an extra couple years of team control if he turned out to be a good pitcher. We were banking on that changeup becoming, taking another step forward and being another plus or plus pitch for him. It's not, but the sinker still has a lot of run to it, and that's more likely than not why the Minnesota Twins weren't able to get much good contact against Randy Dobnak in this game. It is super disappointing that you're not able to get anything going against him, though, because we've seen Randy Dobnak as a starting pitcher, and if you're a St. Paul Saints fan, you've seen him in AAA as a starting pitcher put up ERAs in the high 6s. There is no reason that you should not be able to hit against Randy Dobnak, and especially no reason why you should only be able to get runners in scoring position 2 different times. It wasn't as if this was a bad situational hitting game for the Twins, because they didn't have any situational hitting opportunities in the first place. And this is a team now whose offense has really struggled since the All-Star break. Joe Ryan has struggled since the All-Star break and even a little bit before that. And now this Twins offense has been below league average since the week in Philadelphia. Looking at the numbers, 3.58 runs per game since the All-Star break. That is low. Typically, on average, you're going to have a 4, probably, if you want 700 runs a game, which would, or a season, which would probably be around league average most years. You're getting a little bit more than 4 runs a game, and the Twins are well below that level with 3.58 since the All-Star break. And that does give me a little bit of worry, because yes, this Twins offense was the best, if not the best, one of the best in the American League in terms of runs scored. They had a great ability to get situational hits, and then throughout the month of June and the first part of July, not only was it the situational hitting that was taking a step forward, but it was hitting even with runners not on base. The table setting opportunities, that hitting became a lot better, and we saw a lot of guys take big steps in June and put together really good numbers. And now I'm wondering if it's just going to be roller coaster offense from here on out, because the guys that are hitting, the guys in this lineup, most of them are not these high pedigree superstars. They're not guys that have shown to be consistent hitters in a 162 game season. And really, any major league player can have a good month. So now the worry is, did most of these players, Victor Caratini, Ryan Kreidler, was it just a good month by these guys, or was it something that they actually took a step forward in? And since the All-Star break, it looks like the answer to that is it was just a good month. Now, they have had a couple of games where they've scored double-digit runs, but they've also had 2 or 3 games where they've been shut out against pitchers who are not to be super disrespectful, but just not very good. Randy Dobnak is not a major league pitcher. He is on the Royals right now because they need a seat filler for a team that is in last place in the AL Central and has no hopes of competing in the playoffs this year. That is the only reason why he is there, because other guys are going to start to get shut down to preserve their health for 2027 when they think they can go back and make a run at it. Randy Dobnak is not going to be part of those plans. He's a guy that you throw in to eat innings. He's not a guy that you throw in to expect to get anything, to throw 7 scoreless innings like he was able to tonight. So getting shut out against bad pitchers and averaging now just 3.58 runs per game since the All-Star break is giving me a little bit of pause about what this Minnesota Twins team can do as we hit the home stretch and as we get to the All-Star, or not the All-Star break, but the trade deadline. And a couple of days ago, I said, well, I don't know if we need many hitters. Maybe that was a bit premature to say that, because if we can get an established bat in this lineup that has proven consistency over the course of a 162 game season, then I will definitely take that if the opportunity presents itself. Obviously, still want to get the bullpen and starting pitching rotation under wraps first, but if we have to go and make even more moves, I would not be opposed to also adding to this lineup or bringing up guys like Walker Jenkins, Kalen Culpepper, Emmanuel Rodriguez if he ever gets healthy, Gabriel Gonzalez, all of those guys up to the major league level and see if the young guys can get it done. The young guys who aren't going to be feeling the pressure maybe as much as some of the veterans because they are just kind of more ignorant to the situation and the stakes of the situation. So that is where the state of the Minnesota Twins hitting is. That is where the state of Joe Ryan is. We've talked a lot about the bad things from this game, so let's try to go to a positive note. And the positive note for me is Kendry Rojas's performance once again. 3 scoreless innings. He had 2 walks, but also 4 strikeouts. And yes, the 2 walks, I guess you could say maybe a little bit concerning. 2 walks in 3 innings. But this was a guy earlier on in the season that would have maybe 4 walks in 3 innings and would always have to work around that. But regardless of that, Kendry Rojas now has a 2.51 ERA mixed between a opener, a spot starter, and a bullpen pitcher, and we saw the slider play today, and we saw the fastball play. We saw a 38% whiff rate by Royals hitters when they went up against Kendry Rojas. And if you can get that good of a whiff rate on a consistent basis, that is the main reason why I would like to see him as a starting pitcher in the Twins rotation. The changeup, again, he didn't throw it a ton. I would like to see him rely more on that changeup. It wasn't as, it was good still. It was not bad like it was in the game he pitched against and the start that he had just a couple of nights ago. But hitters still were not chasing it when it was out of the zone, and they just let it hit the outside corner and not swing at it if it did go into the zone. So there were no swings even at the changeup that Kendry Rojas offered today. So I want to see him utilize that changeup a little bit more. If you go fastball up in the zone, changeup off of that down in the zone, with the slider that Kendry Rojas has, that is an excellent sort of arsenal. You don't see a 38% whiff rate from a lot of rookies coming in to the game, especially ones that probably didn't have, I mean, there was some sort of pedigree with Kendry Rojas as a prospect at the trade deadline last year, but it wasn't this high pedigree that you see from like Paul Skeens or Jacob Mizorowski. It was just outside the top 100 in most, baseball prospect magazines, maybe in the top 100 in some systems, but more often than not, a good prospect that you weren't projecting to be otherworldly. But I've been saying it since spring training. His stuff reminds me a lot of Johan Santana. That changeup reminds me a lot of Johan Santana. And maybe it's just the fact that he's left-handed and has a really good changeup. Maybe that's as far as the comparison goes. But I think that there is some top-of-the-rotation potential with this man, Kendry Rojas. Now, the other day I said he needs to have a spot in the starting rotation, and I still stand by that take. I want to add a bit of an addendum to that, however, a caveat, if you will. If the Minnesota Twins do indeed buy a starting pitcher or two at the upcoming trade deadline, I am completely fine with shifting Kendry Rojas into the bullpen because he can have electric stuff. He can be your stopper. He can be your multi-inning guy that can shut down, in big situations, good offenses down the stretch and potentially during the postseason. So if there are two veteran starters that the Twins are adding, the other day I said I would like Luis Castillo and or Mitch Keller added because they're not going to cost a ton of prospect capital. And they're both proven starting pitchers at this level that provides this team with a solid floor in their starting rotation. And based on the depth that we have with a lot of guys getting injured, they need that solid floor and they need that depth. And if you get one or two of those guys, that does, unfortunately for me, push Kendry Rojas into the bullpen. But it makes the bullpen look a whole hell of a lot better because you've got an electric pitcher that I think is going to be a top-of-the-rotation starter at some point in his career, and you are putting him in the bullpen where he can absolutely dominate other teams' hitters with that 98, 99 mile per hour fastball, the slider with a lot of movement, the changeup with a lot of run, and that 38% whiff rate. So I am not opposed, if we do buy starting pitchers, to put Kendry Rojas in the bullpen for the rest of this season. If we don't buy starting pitchers, then Kendry Rojas absolutely deserves a spot in the starting rotation, and we have to kind of stop toying with his role. It seems like this team hasn't committed one way or another to what they want from Kendry Rojas. Sometimes it is the bulk pitcher after an opener. Sometimes he is the opener. Sometimes he's been the starting pitcher but hasn't really been given the go-ahead or the runway to go more than 3 or 4 innings, and then sometimes we've seen him as a bullpen pitcher, and it's nice to have that versatility from a player who is willing to do that. But I think that if you asked every single pitcher in Major League Baseball if they would like to know their role in a concrete sort of manner and it wasn't changing on a game-in, game-out basis, most of those guys would take that rather than being this versatile utility knife sort of player that Kendry Rojas has been. So if no one is brought in at the trade deadline that is a starting pitcher, a capable starting pitcher, then Kendry Rojas still needs to be in this rotation because he has sky-high potential. So listen to me, Jeremy Zoll, and listen to me, Derek Shelton. Give him longer leashes if you are going to start him, and put him into the and get starting pitcher arms so that you can justify putting him in the bullpen for the rest of the season. And whatever he does then, you can start to ramp him up during the offseason to be a starting pitcher by the time spring training rolls around during the 2027 season. Good stuff from Kendry Rojas in this one with the 3 scoreless innings. All right, and our final piece of news, we're going to go back to the downside of things. Byron Buxton was placed on the 10-day injured list yesterday. The Twins called up Tristan Gray from AAA to take his place on the 26-man roster, and we talked about it yesterday. They said it was a day-to-day injury. It's a hip impingement, and with the hip impingement, if you want to fully recover from it, you need to be doing no activity to light activity for essentially 4 to 6 months. You can play through it, but you're going to have times where you aggravate it. So this, again, is going to be an issue for Byron Buxton. I think this hurts a little bit that it only took 7 days for him to re-aggravate it after having some time off from this last one. I think that if this was September, late September, and the Twins were still in the playoff race, I think that he guts it out and still plays. If we are in the playoffs, I think he guts it out and still plays. But I think the Twins still want to be cautious so that they have him down the home stretch and so that he doesn't aggravate it to a level where it would require surgery, and then it would keep him out for the rest of the season. So I am fine with the idea of putting Byron Buxton on the 10-day injured list, especially if you think it's going to be a day-to-day injury. I think it is better to give him more time to recover from it rather than spending a couple of days with him not being active and able to play and taking up a spot on the active roster. I think just give him the 10 days rest, the 15 days rest, whatever it is he needs, so that that hip impingement injury can heal to the point where the risk of re-aggravation once again goes a little bit lower. But again, it's not going to be something that fully heals until the off season. So it might be a talking point throughout the rest of the year that hip is going to just be bothering him. But of course, like I said, later in the season, you're going to see him play through that if the Twins are really in the thick of a playoff race. I wouldn't be surprised, on the other hand, if they are not, if they have fallen out of the playoff race in the middle of September. I would not be surprised if they decide to just shut him down to give him more time to heal that for the 2027 season. Whatever the case may be, again, it will be something that affects him for the rest of this year. Tristan Gray back up. We've had our ups and downs with Tristan Gray. He has a couple of grand slams this year. More recently, he's been very, very bad. His defense has been subpar at shortstop. His offense, which was good early on in the season when he was a spot starter, for the first month and a half, the numbers looked really good. He started to get more time at shortstop. And again, the defense, he was flubbing balls around. He was running into Luke Keeschel as both of them would go into center field to try and make a catch on a pop-up. I think that happened a couple of times. It's not like super exciting to have him back in the lineup. And then you also have to deal with the fact that it's probably going to be Luke Keeschel in center field, who again, did not play well enough during spring training in a corner outfield tryout to be an emergency option for this team at the beginning of the year in the corner outfield, or to be some sort of platoon option to give other guys an opportunity to go at second base. They kept him at second base throughout the first half of the season, and only when he showed that he's not actually that good of a defensive second baseman, started playing him a little bit in the corner outfield, started trying to get him prepared, and then all of a sudden he shifts to center field. So I don't know how good the defense can be with Keeschel in center field, or even if Cody Clemens is the guy that they give the most of the reps to for center field. But God help us all, we're going to have an outfield that might not have the best range or the best arms for the next 2 weeks until Byron Buxton is able to return. All right, the Twins are going to go for the series win at Target Field, their last game of the homestand before heading out to Seattle. That game is going to take place at 12:40 p.m. Central Time. If you're with me here in Arizona, that is a 10:40 a.m. start. The Minnesota Twins will send Bailey Ober to the mound. He's 7-3 with a 4.56 ERA this season, and he has 60 strikeouts in 81 innings of work. Meanwhile, Noah Cameron, who had a good start against Minnesota the last time he faced the Twins, is going to get the start for Kansas City. 5-8, 4.93 ERA, 100 strikeouts in 107 2/3 innings of work. Hopefully the Twins can get a win in that one. I think it would be utterly disappointing to lose a series to the worst team in the American League if they were to do that. So I think this is a pivotal game. I think this is a game that can keep them still in the hunt, and Obviously, they'll be in the hunt no matter what at the end of this game, but this would just give them a lot of confidence going into a road trip against a pretty good Seattle Mariners team that made it to the ALCS just a year ago. And that is going to be the last call on the Twins Talk for this evening, as we are going to be back after tomorrow's game to recap everything that we learned and talk about all of our takeaways. Thanks for pulling up a stool and joining the conversation at the Twinkie Town Tavern. We'll see you back here after the next one. Go Twins!